Are you trying to heal your relationship with food and with your body, but you're feeling like you're just starting over and over and over and over again? Does it feel difficult to gather all the strength you have left and start one more time? I have felt like this 100 times without exaggerating when I was trying to heal my relationship with food and recover from binge eating disorder. In today's episode, I am going to share a few tips that have helped me to switch the mindset from feeling like I have to start over a million times to seeing it all as one continuous journey with a lot of different learning points. So if that's something that you would like to learn more, then keep listening. Binge on Self-Love podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It doesn't provide professional medical advice, and it is not a substitute for diagnosis or treatment. When trying to heal our relationship with food and our bodies, or when we're trying to recover from an eating disorder or disordered eating, it can very often feel like we're just starting over and over and over and over and over again. I want to emphasize that everyone's journey is different and that your experience might be totally different from mine, and that's perfectly okay. But to me, it felt like I am starting over all the time. I would promise myself that tomorrow I am going all in. I'm going to really focus on my eating habits. I'm going to face all of the challenges. But then, for whatever reason, I ended up binging, either just once or for multiple times. And I always ended up feeling like I failed and like I have to start over again. And the more this kept happening, the more frustrated I felt with myself, and the harder I found it each time to start again. I doubted myself so many times, like, will this ever get better? What if I'm going to feel like this for the rest of my life? What if I just can't change? I feel like I don't have to remind you, but doubts are part of any attempt to change or any attempt to start something new or to start doing something differently. But of course, when there's something that's taking over your entire life, like an eating disorder or a negative body image or an addiction maybe, self-doubt can be very strong. Looking at things in a retrospect, there are few things that I feel like really helped me on my journey to look at my journey as a continuous path with different learning points rather than something that I keep failing at and something that I have to start over again. It also helped me to be more appreciative of any progress I've made, and it made me feel proud of it, of any progress that I've made. And for a long time, I'm not sure why, but I hoped and kind of thought that everything would change from day one when I decided to recover from an eating disorder. And it really didn't, because it's not an overnight miracle. It's a continuous process. And that's a lot of learning that has to happen. There's a lot of reality checks, and there's also a lot of positive things that happen. So that's something I want to talk to you about today. So let's move to the things that have helped me on my journey. The first tip that I have for you is not thinking about it as starting over. I know it probably sounds weird, but what really made a difference for me was to look at my journey, my recovery journey, as one continuous path rather than something that I have to start over every now and then. Now, if the idea of starting over and starting fresh is something that works for you or it motivates you, then please do what's best for you. In my case, it didn't really work. I found it more and more demotivating because I felt like I was failing all the time, and whenever I would binge, I felt like I failed, and I always felt the pressure that each time that I'm going to start over, it's going to be much more difficult. Plus, it also put pressure on me to believe that my journey has to be perfect, otherwise I failed, which also is not true. Recovery journey isn't about perfection, it's about recovering from an eating disorder or an addiction or whatever you are recovering from. So instead of thinking about it like something that I failed and something I have to start yet over again, I've tried thinking about it as a learning curve. There is something that I can learn each and every time things don't go as smoothly as I expected them to go. There's something I can learn about the emotions I felt in any given moment and why I have reacted the way that I did. And was there a particular trigger, or was there something that helped me not to binge today? Maybe it's also about changing your mindset and not seeing failure as a failure, but rather as something that is a valuable lesson that you can learn about yourself and about your life and about whatever that's going on. I know that it's so much easier said than done, but every time something like that happens, it's a chance to see that, maybe this doesn't work for me, or on the contrary, this seems to work for me, or maybe I can try this, or maybe this thing that my therapist said now seems to make more sense, etc. Of course, I haven't changed my mindset overnight, but it was something that I've tried to remind myself every time when I felt, oh great, I have to start over again. No, I was more like, okay, so this happened. This is something I can take away from it, but I keep going. There's still a lot of things that I need to work towards. There's still a lot of things that I have to do. So let's take this as a learning and let's keep going. Number 2 is taking it day by day. I know what you're thinking, yet another cliche, and I'm sorry, but it's really one of the few things that I feel like truly made a difference in not just my recovery, but in anything. Because it applies not just to recovery, it applies to anything that you perceive as difficult or challenging or new. Let me give you an example. If you think of writing a thesis or of completing a really difficult project at work, if you think about it in its complexity, it feels very overwhelming and dooming. But if you look at things from a day-to-day basis, it can really help to take off the unnecessary pressure, and it can really make you focus on what matters now in this moment. This is what I can do today to progress with XYZ. This is what I can do today to move this obstacle, or this is what I can do today to learn a little bit more about XYZ. There's only so much we can do in a day, but all those days adds up to something bigger that helps us to progress. If you want to learn how to cook, but you've never really cooked before, it can feel overwhelming to think about the end goal and how difficult some meals are to prepare. But if you focus on what you can learn today, before you know it, you'll progress without even realizing it. If I apply this to my recovery journey, when I think of my recovery as a whole, it gets overwhelming. It gets scary. There's an end goal at the very end of it, recovering from binge eating disorder, but that's too far away from me right now. I'm here in this moment, trying to heal my relationship with food and with my body, trying to stay binge-free, trying to introduce healthy coping skills into my personal toolkit. And this whole process may seem intimidating, but when I try to focus on the day-to-day progress, or not even progress, because even that can already put pressure on me, but doing these little things every day that I know are good for me and that can potentially help me to recover or to move in the right direction, then it all seems much less intimidating and scary. I focus on what I can do today to contribute to my recovery journey. For example, I didn't binge today. That's awesome. I'm really proud of myself. Or I caught an urge or thought to binge early on, and I was able to stop and think about, why do I feel this way right now? What's going on? Or I was able to enjoy this delicious pistachio croissant today without triggering a binge. And even though some thoughts about binge eating occurred, I stopped them and I didn't act upon them, and I'm really proud of myself. These are just a few examples how I try to navigate the day-to-day progress without feeling overwhelmed or intimidated by everything. Another thing that I found to really make a difference and that supports the idea of a continuous journey rather than something you have to start over for me was journaling. I've never been into journaling until recently, but I have to say I find it incredibly helpful. I've mentioned in some of the episodes before that I've experienced periods of binge eating and then periods of not binge eating for about 2 or 3 years now. And I've decided that I want to better understand what's going on, so I started journaling a few weeks ago and I really, really like it. What I like about it is that it seems to help me to be really honest with myself, because in my mind sometimes I tend to excuse myself or push some thoughts aside, whereas when I put them on paper, I'm like, I better be honest with myself. I don't want to write something that's not true or that's not the reality. So I write down, this is what happened, this is what I did, this is how I feel about it, this is what I think triggered it, and this is what I think I can do better the next time. It also helps me to see any recurring behavior and feelings and identify potential patterns. For example, I've noticed that when I skip a snack during the afternoon, I tend to come home in the evening more prone to eating way past feeling full. But if I have 1 or 2 more snacks in the afternoon, I don't feel as hungry when I get home. Journaling is also a great option how to reflect on your journey day by day, but then also being able to see the progress you've made in the long run. And I don't know about you, but for me, putting all those thoughts and emotions on paper, I always leave feeling much better. My tip number 4 is the fact that sometimes the progress cannot be measured. It's an idea that I like to apply to my recovery journey more in retrospect, and it's the fact that not all progress can be measured. The change that we experience isn't always tangible. It can be a shift in your thinking. It can be realizing something that you haven't been able to realize for a long time. It can be being honest and admitting something to yourself or to someone. It can be opening up about something. It can be making a decision. It can be choosing something. It can be putting yourself and your recovery first. All those things, the inner work that we do, is equally as important as tangible progress, and we shouldn't forget about it. My last tip number 5, is don't expect a linear path and have realistic expectations. Again, I know it's easier said than done, and plus, what is realistic expectation? I used to think about recovery as about a linear process, like a straight path from point A to point B. And I thought that's what recovery is supposed to be like. I thought that once I make up my mind, I won't binge ever again. I just have to go for it and everything will change. And that obviously isn't true. During my recovery, I binged numerous times. Oftentimes it felt like 1 step forward and 2 steps back, but it was also about small victories and sometimes taking 1 step forward and not moving back. It's called being in a recovery and recovering on purpose. It's a process. And by setting unrealistic expectations and by expecting a straightforward path, I was already setting myself up for failure. The expectations that I've had that I'm never going to binge again from day one, it was unrealistic. But I think that my desire for perfection maybe played a role in that as well. So what's important to keep in mind is that recovery and healing your relationship with food and with your body or anything else that you're trying to do is usually not a linear process. So these were a few of my tips that helped me to tackle the feeling like I have to start over and over again. So let me just quickly summarize it for you. Number 1, don't think about starting over, but rather about one continuous journey that you just keep on exploring. Number 2, take it day by day. Number 3, journal to reflect your feelings. Number 4, Keep in mind that the progress can't always be measured and that the inner work we do is equally as important as any tangible progress. And number 5, don't expect the journey to be linear or perfect. One more thing before I wrap up this episode. No matter how many times you feel like you've started over, and no matter how long it takes, you can do it, you can recover, you can heal, and you are so worthy and deserving of recovering and healing. Thank you so much for listening today. If you think this episode could help your friend, your family member, or someone you know, please feel free to share it with them. I'll be back next week with another episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the Binge on Self-Love podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube so you don't miss any new episode. Until then, take care and talk to you soon.